Thanks for coming to hang out with me again today. If you're new here, my name's Jess. Well, we're approaching the end of January, so that means it's time to start thinking about Valentine's Day rather than winter. So I always like to go back through and look at the things that I've already made and pick out my favorites, put them all into one video to give myself some inspiration for new crafts and to also give you some inspiration as well. I hope you're excited. You know I am. Let's get started.
I took one of these wooden heart plaques from the Dollar Tree and one of their mini wooden crates, and I gave each one coat of chalk paint. I used the color Plaster by Waverly. Once the paint was dry, I used another Waverly color called Mineral, and I just did a dry brushing technique all over both pieces. Once the paint had dried, I used hot glue to attach the crate to the bottom of the heart. I just lined the bottom corners of the crate up with each side of the heart. Then I cut a piece of floral foam and I stuck that inside the crate, and I started adding some greenery and some white flowers to the floral foam. I didn't glue the foam in because I was thinking maybe I would want to switch this out later on. As it gets closer to Valentine's Day, I might change the white flowers out for some pink or red ones. To decorate the front of the crate, I just made a simple bow out of this black and white ribbon that I had found on sale after Christmas. Now, I did hot glue the bow on, but if you think you might want to change it out, you could always just tie it on to one of the slats on the crate or use a piece of wire to wire it on. Then I took 2 lengths of jute twine and I ran it through the holes that were already at the top of the heart so that I had something to hang this with. Since I was using 2 lengths, I just added a little dab of hot glue to the ends of them and kind of rolled it together so that I could fit it through the hole easier. Here's a look how this turned out. I really like how this looks, and you could even take this one step farther by adding your initials or your family names to the top of the heart. The Dollar Tree always has such a great selection of wooden items for crafting. I really love these little drawer boxes they have, so to get started for the first one, I decided to take 3 of the drawers, and I'm just using the outside part of the 3 pieces, and I'm hot gluing them together in a line. I decided to just use hot glue because I use the Gorilla Glue sticks and they have a pretty good hold, but until the glue set, I just added a few clips also from the Dollar Tree to hold everything in place. To give my centerpiece some elevation, I'm using these wooden cubes, and I just took 4 of them and flipped the boxes over and glued the 4 in each corner of the 3 boxes to act as feet for on the bottom of the piece. Even though these pieces are real wood, there's not a lot of natural wood grain running through them. So rather than staining my boxes, I decided to give them 1 coat of white chalk paint. After my white paint had dried, I decided to do some dry brushing with the Elephant color by Waverly. Now, I wanted the center of my boxes to stay fairly light, so as I was dry brushing, I concentrated around the perimeter of each box so that the center portion would stay a bit lighter. The Dollar Tree carries these wooden letters, which I knew would be perfect for on the front of my boxes. So I took out the letter I and the letter U, and I just gave them 1 coat of some black chalk paint. Now, these packs of letters only come with 1 letter a piece in the pack, so this was a perfect project for this because sometimes when you try to spell out words that have multiples of the same letter, you have to buy multiple packs. They also carry these packs of wooden hearts that come in the natural wood color, pink and red. So I picked out the biggest red one that I could find, and then I was able to hot glue everything onto the front of my boxes. So of course I started with my red heart in the center, and then I put I on one side and U on the other to spell out Hi Heart You. So I decided to use these boxes as a centerpiece, so I filled them with some floral foam, and then I just started snipping apart some red flowers and adding them to the center of each box. But I think a really great idea that you could also do with these boxes is add some different Valentine candies and treats to them, and they could sit out next to your coffee bar. The
Dollar Tree always carries these decorative trays, and sometimes they have the little nubby pieces on the end, sometimes they're just a smooth tray, but I had this one in my stash that had the little dots running around the outside of it, and I like that design element it adds, so I gave this tray 3 coats of the Plaster Color by Waverly. The reason I did 3 coats is obviously 1 coat wasn't enough to cover everything up, and after I did the 2nd coat I could still see some brush strokes, so I decided to add the 3rd coat just to smooth it out as much as I could. Now if the weather was a little better, I probably would have just taken it outside and spray painted it, but it's a little too cold for that now. I love these little wooden hearts they have at the Dollar Tree right now, and I especially love these ones because they have the mini hearts inside the bigger heart. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to paint these or if I wanted to stain them, so I decided to go somewhere in between. And I mixed the antique wax with a little bit of the ink color chalk paint to give myself a really dark stain. Now I'm using gloves when I put this on because I really wanted to make sure that I got inside all of the openings on these hearts, and I knew that it would just make a big mess. So after I had added a coat of my wax and paint mixture to the heart, I wiped it off with a wet wipe to get the excess off and to show the wood grain. I wanted to create a bow for in the corner of my tray, so I took this black and white striped ribbon that I had on hand. I think I got this from Walmart, and I started by just folding over a loop to the width that I wanted my bow, and then because this ribbon's wired, I took another length of it and I cut the wire off of each end, and that's what I'm going to use to tie around the center of my bow. Once I had the center of my bow cinched together, I used one of those wires that I had cut off of that other piece, and that's what I used to hold everything in place. And then all I had to do was take that piece that didn't have the wires on it anymore, and I just tied it around the center, and I made sure that the knot was in the back. Instead of adding tails to my bow, I decided to glue some greenery to the corner of the tray and kind of fan it out where the tails of the bow would normally fall. I kind of laid one piece down going in one direction in the corner and one in the other. And then once I had my bow hot glued on top of the 2 pieces of greenery, I took just a little tiny piece of greenery and tucked it in to make sure you couldn't see any of the hot glue. The last thing I had to do was hot glue my hearts into place. So I laid them out and spaced them out evenly, and I started with the bottom heart and hot glued that one on first, and then I moved to the top heart and I hot glued that one down, and then that way I was able to judge better where I needed to place that center heart. Now, if you're not really into neutrals for Valentine's Day, I think painting these wooden hearts a bright red or a bright pink would look really pretty, or you could change out the bow that you put at the top of the tray to something that has more pinks or more reds in it. Another thing I always love to get at the Dollar Tree at Valentine's Day are their heart-shaped doilies. These are paper doilies, and they're great for adding a little extra decoration to your tablescapes, or they're great to use as a stencil too. And so that's what I decided to do with these. So I just grabbed one of the doilies. Sometimes they stick together, and that's okay, but we just need one for this project. And I have this 8x8 canvas on hand. If you don't have an 8x8, they do sell 8x10 canvases at the Dollar Tree. So I took the Mineral Color by Waverly and a sponge pouncer brush. I'm not sure what they're called. They're for stenciling. They're like a foam brush, but they have a flat end to them. So all I did was dip it in the paint color, dab off some of the excess, and then start dabbing around the edges of the doily. I didn't use anything to hold it in place. I just kind of held it in the center, and it went on fine. And I made sure that as I was pouncing, I was going towards the outside of the doily too, so that some of the paint went around the outside of the heart. And then once you lifted it up, you can see that the pattern's there from the doily. I didn't care for how there was just a large blank space in the center of the doily, and I had these wooden hearts on hand from the Dollar Tree, and I realized that this heart that was sort of elongated fit perfectly in there. So to keep it coordinated, I gave this heart one coat of the Mineral Color also. After everything was dry, all I had to do was hot glue the heart to the center of the print. And then I decided to keep mine pretty simple. I didn't add any bows or anything, but I didn't care for the hole that was still left at the top of the heart. I thought it would blend in enough that I wouldn't have to worry about covering it up, but I decided instead of a bow, I would just take a piece of this ribbon from the Dollar Tree and just tie a simple knot in the center and then dovetail the two ends. And this is where you could be creative and make this fit your own style. I think that instead of using a neutral color like the mineral, if you stenciled the doily on with some red or painted the heart red, it would add a really pretty pop of color to your decorations. I used the same ribbon to create a hanger for my picture, so I used my ruler and I measured down about 3 inches on each side, and I added a dab of hot glue just to the top corner of the frame, so that way there was a little tail hanging down. And I did that on both sides so that it would be even, and then I made sure to dovetail both ends of the ribbon as well. For the next project, I found one of these pallet hearts at my Dollar Tree, and I've seen some people where their planks run in the opposite direction, so if you can only find that one, this will work for either one that you find. So you guys know I love the Antique Wax by Waverly, and usually I like to paint it on and then I brush it off with a paper towel, but this time I was out of paper towels in my craft room, so I actually used a baby wipe. And I really like the effect that it gave it. It really showed off that wood grain a lot more than just wiping it with a paper towel. So I did that to the first, third, and fourth plank, and I left the second one blank because I wanted to paint it with the Ballet Slipper Color by Waverly. And my paint is a little bit thicker, so I only needed one coat for this project. Then to create a little bit of a design on the pink plank, I used my ruler and I lined it up with the bottom edge of the heart, and I created diagonal lines going the whole way up. And then I crossed it over in the opposite direction and I made diagonal lines going the other way, so it kind of created a grid pattern. And then I took my Sharpie paint pen, and everywhere the lines intersected, I drew on a circle, and I did go back through and make those circles just a little bit bigger. And then the lines that were left that I had made with the pencil, I just did stitch marks that connected each circle together. So it kind of gave it a quilted pattern look. Alright, so I need your opinion on this. This little bunch of greenery that I found at the Dollar Tree says that it's a spider plant, but I think it's just a fern. So you'll have to let me know in the comments. Are you team spider plant or are you team fern? So I used what I'm going to call the ferns as a little embellishment on the heart, and I cut 2 of the leaves off, and then I glued down some little miniature white flowers and then a larger white flower that I already had in my stash. Then I took 2 lengths of jute twine, and when I make these wooden signs, I always like the knot to show on the front of the sign, so I always string it through the back and then I tie a knot on the front so that I can hang it up. Here's a look at the finished project. This might be my favorite one for this week. I really like how it turned out. The first sign that I picked out was this heart-shaped sign, and I loved that it had an opening in the center, and I knew it would be perfect to use with my favorite thing from the Dollar Tree, the car wash cloth. The great thing about this sign is the love that's in the center is just made out of really thin cardboard, so it was really easy to peel off the front of the sign. I laid the sign face down on my car wash cloth and I started cutting around the outside. I wanted to make sure that I left about 1 inch to 1.5 inch gap around the outside of the heart because I wanted to fold that fabric over, so I needed enough to glue into place. I started at the bottom of the heart and I just ran a bead of hot glue and I started folding the edges of the cloth over. Every time I came to a part that was really curved, in order to take the bulk out, I would just cut a little slit with my scissors and then glue each side of the flap down. And then that way it didn't get too bulky on the back side of the heart. And I just kept doing that the whole way around. Every time I came to a part where it seemed like it was going to fold over on itself, rather than letting it fold over, I would just cut a little slit, and that took out a good bit of the bulk. There was still a little bit there, but because this was the back side, I wasn't too worried about it.
Once I had the whole outside of the heart glued down, I wanted to leave that opening show in my heart, so I started by cutting a little slit in the center of the fabric, and then I was able to cut most of the fabric out, but again I left about 1 inch to 1.5 inches so that I would have enough to glue down towards the inside of the heart. So after I had all of the excess cut out, then I just went around everywhere that the heart curved a little. I just cut a slit because that way I needed to do that first on this inside part, because it would just be easier to wrap since it was a smaller opening. So once I had all my slits cut, then I was able to go back in with my hot glue and just glue all of those flaps down into place. To add a little design to my heart, I decided to use some regular jute twine and I wrapped it the whole way around my heart. So I started by hot gluing the jute on the back, and you can see I already wrapped part of the heart here, but I wrapped it going in one direction, and then once I had it the whole way around my heart, I cut that piece off and I started a new piece and I started wrapping it in the opposite direction. That way the jute twine kind of crisscrossed on itself and it just created a little pattern on the front of the heart. Instead of just decorating this wreath with silk flowers, I decided to make my own flowers out of felt. So I'm going to create 2 different types of felt flowers, and this first one I think most people already know how to make, but in case you don't, I'll walk you through it real quick. So you just take anything round. In this case I used a spool of ribbon, which is probably about 5 inches across, and you cut the circle out, and since I used a marker to trace on my felt, I just made sure that I cut off all of that marker. Then starting on the outside of the circle, I just start spiral cutting it the whole way down until I get to the center of the circle. So the great thing about these flowers is you don't have to worry if your lines aren't perfect. You just want to try to make sure that the space you cut around the spiral is about the same the whole way around. So in this case, you can see once I got it started, it's about 1/2 inch thick the whole way till you get to the center. Then you go back to the outside of the circle again and you just start rolling up the felt until you get the whole way towards the center, and then there's a little flap at the center of the circle that you can use to glue down on the bottom of the circle. So once I had everything rolled up into place, I just used a little hot glue and I ran hot glue all over the bottom first, and then I used that flap to make sure everything stayed in place. And whenever you're hot gluing on fabric like this, it does take a while to set up, so usually I hold it there for a little bit, and be careful because there is some glue there that could seep out and burn you. And once I'm sure that everything is set into place, then I just set my flower down on my silicone mat to continue setting up. The second type of flower that I'm going to make still needs to use circles, but they need to be a little bit smaller. So I'm using this Waverly paint canister, and this is one of the bigger ones. And I would say that these circles are between 2.5 and 3 inches across. And for this type of flower, you'll need to cut out 5 of these circles. Once you have the 5 circles cut out, to assemble each of the petals of the flower, you'll need to fold the circle in half and then fold it in half the other way. And I always like to add a dab of hot glue right in the center, and you can see it kind of has the shape of a fortune cookie. And I'll zoom in here and run you through that again. So here's a better look. You see, you fold the circle in half and then fold it in half again, and you just need to add a dot of hot glue right in the center and pinch it together. And like I said, it kind of gives you that fortune cookie shape, and you want to do that with all 5 of the circles that you cut out of the felt. I also cut a smaller circle that was probably about 1.5 inches across, just to use as a base to hot glue everything else to. So now that all my petals are folded in half and glued, you're going to take the side of the petal that doesn't have a fold on it. So I'll show you. You put your 2 fingers in the slots, and then the side that doesn't have a fold, you want to add a little hot glue and stick it to the base. So after the first one's in place, then I take the next one and I'm going to lay it going in the opposite direction. So again, I just pinch it with my fingers, and on the smooth side of the petal, I hot glue that in the opposite direction, and then the other 2 petals will go in the opposite directions of the first 2. So you can see here, I go up, pinch it again, and then I put the glue on the smooth side and I stick it in between two of the first ones. And then for the fifth petal, I'm just opening up all the other petals that are already glued in place, and I'm just hot gluing that right in the center with the point facing down. And that gives us a nice full flower. Instead of cutting out a basic leaf shape with some felt, I decided to do something a little fancier. So I cut a strip of green felt about 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches wide. And then I just started going in with my scissors and fringing it out. So the fringes are probably about 1/8 inch wide, and I only cut to about 1/4 inch. So there was about 1/4 inch sticking out on the other side of the felt. Then once I had all of the fringes cut in the felt, I could move on to assembling we'll call it a leaf. So I'm sure you're like me and you have a lot of silk flowers in your craft stash that you use the flowers but you don't use the leaves, and you have all those metal stems laying around. So this is a good way to use up some of those metal stems. So I clipped off a piece of the floral stem, and I started with my fringy felt piece here. And I just started by hot gluing it at the top and spiral wrapping it down until I like the length of it. I was able to get 2 of these leaves out of the same strip of felt. Let me know in the comments, would you call this a leaf or a feather? I don't know. What would you call it? The last thing I needed to do was just hot glue everything in place. So I laid my feather leaves down first, and then you can see I created 2 of the red roses and 1 of the big pink fluffy flowers. So I put the pink in the center, and then I put a rose on each side. I think heart-shaped decorations are one of those things that can be left up year-round, especially if you keep them more neutral toned. So I got this wooden heart shape last year at the Dollar Tree, and I know they always bring these back every year, so I'm sure they have them in the store now as well. I started by giving my heart shape 1 coat of white chalk paint. After my paint was dry, I took some greenery that I had on hand. This was a flat piece that I had got at Michael's, I want to say last year, maybe at the end of summer. I know it was on like a heavy discount clearance sale. And I just started taking the bundles off of the flat part to make it easier. I did notice the last time I was in the Dollar Tree that they started putting out some of their spring flowers and spring greenery, so you could get some really nice stuff there as well. And I wanted to outline my heart with the greenery. And these little bundles came in like a 4-pack. I don't know what to call it. Like there's 4 pieces of greenery on each bundle. So it made the work for me a lot easier because I didn't have to clip off each individual piece. I could keep it as a little 4-piece and just hot glue that the whole way around the perimeter of my wreath. So once I had the whole outside of the heart shape covered in the greenery, I went back through where I thought there were a few sparse areas, and I just added some individual pieces in here and there. Now this is something you could do if you wanted it to look more Valentine's Day. You could add some red or pink flowers in with the greenery, or you could just cover the whole outside of the heart with just flowers, and I think that would look really pretty too. For the center of my heart, I decided to use 2 of these chalkboard tags from the Dollar Tree. These are available year-round, not just at Valentine's Day. And I thought the 2 of them glued together fit really well inside of this heart. So I hot glued the 2 together, and then I used a pencil to sketch out the words you and me. And then I used my paint pen, also from the Dollar Tree, which I've really been loving, and I went over the letters with my paint pen. Now, here's a little pro tip for you. Don't forget to erase your pencil lines, because I apparently forgot to erase mine, and I didn't realize it until I was editing that you can still see the pencil lines in there. So I had to go back and erase those. But I think something like this would look really cute with your family's initial in the center, or even a family photo in the center as well. I used a piece of thicker jute cord to connect the two hearts together and also to help hide the holes at the top of each heart because they are kind of big. And then I used the same jute cord and I just tied a little bow and hot glued that to the top as well. Now when I put my jute cord on, I made sure that the knot was on the back side of each one, and then that way you wouldn't be able to see the knot, but it did create a little bulkiness in the back. So before I hot glued the hearts to the bigger heart, I used a few pieces of craft stick on the back of the hearts to even that out so that it would adhere to the bigger heart better. And it also elevated it so that it gave it more dimension.
Thanks for spending some time with me today. I left some videos on the screen that I think you might like. I hope you have a great week, and I'll talk to you in the next one.